Today I'm going to be talking about competitive generic therapies, and our presentation is entitled Easy as 1, 2, 3, CGT, FDA, and Industry. Our learning objectives for today are to describe the process for submitting a request for competitive generic therapy designation, to outline the criteria for designating a drug as a CGT, to provide information on the considerations for expedited development and review of CGTs, and to answer procedural questions regarding CGT exclusivity determinations. I know our session today is focused on exclusivity, but because CGT is so new, we want to spend the first half of our presentation discussing CGT designation and the procedural requirements before we get to exclusivity. Where did CGTs originate? The FDA Reauthorization Act of 2017, FDARA, was the reauthorization of the generic drug user fee amendments to support timely access to high-quality, affordable generic medicines. Section 803 of FDARA amended the FD&C Act to add Section 506H. This created a new pathway by which FDA may, at the request of the applicant, designate a drug with inadequate generic competition as a CGT, and at the request of the applicant, FDA may also expedite the development and review of an abbreviated new drug application, an ANDA, for a drug designated as a CGT. Section 808 of FDARA also amended the FD&C Act to add the CGT exclusivity and forfeiture provisions. Also, as part of FDARA, FDA was required to issue guidance on CGT. The first guidance, the draft guidance, was published February 19, 2019. FDA was required to publish that draft guidance within 18 months of FDARA passing. And then the final guidance was recently published on March 16, 2020. FDA was required by FDARA to publish that 1 year after the docket closed on the draft guidance. So we were able to publish that a little bit early. The statutory deadline was April 21st, 2020. So if you're considering development of a CGT drug product, various factors may influence your decision to develop or not develop a particular generic medicine. Obviously, some drugs may not attract much interest because there's a potentially limited market for those products. And naturally, some products are also more difficult to develop. But these drugs can play an important role in diagnosing, treating, and preventing various types of diseases or conditions. And FDARA granted CGT authority to incentivize generic competition for these products, which can help ensure patients have access to the medicines that they need. FDA's goals for CGTs: to facilitate this increased competition, FDA may take certain actions to expedite the development and to expedite the review of an ANDA for a drug designated as a CGT. Hopefully we can help to clarify the regulatory expectations for a particular drug and assist applicants in developing a more complete submission. To promote a more efficient and effective ANDA review process in order to help reduce the number of review cycles necessary to obtain ANDA approval. Requesting CGT designation. A request is submitted by an ANDA applicant, and the designation is application specific. Each applicant should submit a request to FDA for designation. This is one of the things we sought to clarify in the final guidance. We received some comments on this related to the language around drug products and applicants. So we wanted to clarify that each applicant should submit their request if they want CGT designation. And once FDA designates a drug product in the applicant's ANDA as a CGT, that application will remain designated as a CGT. The CGT request also has to be made concurrent with or any time prior to the submission of an original ANDA. Prior to the application, it can be submitted as a standalone request or as an accompaniment to the pre-submission facility correspondence, PFC, for an ANDA. If you're requesting a pre-ANDA meeting, we recommend submitting before the meeting request. Also, when you're submitting with your application, there were a number of questions and comments received on the draft guidance around this. So we sought to clarify that you shouldn't be submitting your request along with any amendments to your application. It has to be with the original application. You can't file any amendments during the filing review or those types of things unless it meets the exception and FDA refuses to receive the application. The request for CGT designation also must be made for a drug for which there's inadequate generic competition. And FDA will determine whether a CGT designation request satisfies the criteria within 60 days of the request. A letter will be issued to an applicant either granting or denying CGT designation. Inadequate generic competition for a drug means at the time of the designation, there's not more than one approved version of that drug in the active section of the Orange Book. It can also mean no drugs are listed in the active section. And as we clarified in the final guidance, each strength of a drug is a distinct drug product. So you could potentially have CGT designation for one particular strength of a drug. Inadequate generic competition may also mean either the RLD or drug approved in an ANDA referencing the same RLD as the drug for which designation as a CGT is sought. So what should you put in your CGT designation request? Pre-assigned ANDA number, a statement supporting your CGT designation request, identification of the drug product, the application number, proprietary name, and the strength, and information supporting inadequate generic competition. And it should be submitted in ECTD format through the ESG, and you should include an FDA Form 356H. What are the benefits of CGT designation? It can help to expedite the development and review of an application, although most applicants are primarily concerned with eligibility for CGT 180-day exclusivity. As of September 2020, there's been more than 500 requests for CGT designation, and around 80% of requests have been granted that designation. And there's been 42 grants of CGT 180-day exclusivity. So additional benefits of CGT designation: actions FDA may take to expedite development of the drug product. Product development meetings and pre-submission meetings. And we wanted to point out here that the product development meeting and pre-submission meetings themselves don't take place on an expedited timeline, but rather those are intended to help expedite the overall development of the drug product. Actions FDA can take to expedite review: mid-cycle review meetings, coordinated review of CGTs within OGD and CDER, and FDA will strive to act on the ANDA as soon as possible, including prior to the GDUFA goal date. But again, CGT designation does not guarantee or infer an earlier GDUFA goal date. FDA will just use the development and review actions, hopefully to expedite the ANDA, and we would take action prior to the GDUFA goal date, if at all possible. So we wanted to list the factors that FDA considers when we're looking at taking expedited action. One is the complexity of developing the ANDA for that specific drug, the potential public health impact of the drug product, including the severity of the disease that's being treated, size of impacted patient population, and availability of other therapeutic alternatives, and of course the impact on FDA resources and existing workload commitments, and whether there are any unexpired patents or exclusivities for the reference listed drug. We also wanted to point out here that there's a CGT web page listing all approved ANDAs for products that have received a CGT designation. And it's updated on a bi-weekly basis. It includes information about approved applications, what drug products, and potential CGT exclusivity. This is a snapshot of what the CGT approvals webpage looks like. You'll see the RLD name and NDA number, the ANDA number and the ANDA applicant, active ingredient, dosage form strength, date of approval, and whether or not it was eligible for CGT exclusivity. And you'll see either yes or no there. And CGT exclusivity forfeiture. If there's a no there, that means that eligibility was not forfeited. If it's blank, that determination has not yet been made. And if there's an NA, it means it was not eligible for CGT exclusivity. You'll see that for line number 30. It was not eligible for CGT exclusivity, so it has an NA for forfeiture and date of first commercial marketing. And obviously we'll discuss further later on the commercial marketing triggers CGT exclusivity, so you'll see the date of first commercial marketing listed there. Moving on to CGT exclusivity, we wanted to take a moment here and point out how this CGT exclusivity is different from 180-day patent challenge exclusivity. So the exclusivity itself is newly created under FDARA along with the CGT designation itself. CGT exclusivity is provided to the first approved applicant of a drug with a CGT designation for which there's no unexpired patents or exclusivities listed in the Orange Book at the time of original submission of the ANDA. It's intended to incentivize competition for drugs not protected by patent or exclusivity and for which there's inadequate generic competition. It's not available to an applicant who's eligible for 180-day patent challenge exclusivity for the same drug that's been designated as a CGT. So looking at our chart, we can see that eligibility for Hatch-Waxman 180-day exclusivity is based on the applicant qualifying as a first applicant. And under CGT exclusivity, it's the first approved applicant. And then for Hatch-Waxman 180-day exclusivity, eligibility is possible after your original submission. CGT, we mentioned earlier, it's not possible to be eligible for the exclusivity after your original submission. We mentioned the refuse to receive exception. And Hatch-Waxman 180-day exclusivity blocks subsequent applicants prior to the grant of exclusivity and after the exclusivity grant. And CGT blocks other applicants after the exclusivity grant and the commencement of commercial marketing. Hatch-Waxman exclusivity is subject to multiple complex forfeiture provisions, and CGT is subject to a single simple forfeiture provision. So there are also some similarities between the two.
Both can be relinquished or selectively waived. Both are triggered by first commercial marketing. Both can be shared, although that's uncommon for CGT exclusivity if you had multiple first approved applicants. And the exclusivity period runs continuously once triggered. We've mentioned first approved applicants a couple of times, so we wanted to define that. This means an ANDA applicant is first approved applicant for a CGT approved on the first day on which any ANDA for such designated CGT is approved. They're not eligible for 180-day patent challenge exclusivity for the drug that's subject of the ANDA for the CGT, and it's not a drug for which all versions have forfeited eligibility for 180-day patent challenge exclusivity. When we're talking about the exclusivity criteria, a competitive generic therapy is defined as a drug designated as a CGT, which we mentioned in the first half of the presentation, how to receive CGT designation for your application, and is a drug for which there's no unexpired patents or exclusivities in the Orange Book at the time of submission of your application. And this is different than how CGT is defined for purposes of the designation provisions, which we covered earlier. The drug may be designated as a CGT, but then later ineligible for CGT exclusivity if there are unexpired patents or exclusivities in the Orange Book at the time the original ANDA is submitted. The special forfeiture rules for CGT. Exclusivity is forfeited by a first approved applicant if they fail to commence commercial marketing within 75 days. It's the simple forfeiture rule that we mentioned earlier, and it's as simple as you're not commencing your commercial marketing within 75 days of approval.
How can an applicant trigger CGT exclusivity? The first approved applicant must commence commercial marketing within the 75-day period beginning on the calendar day after approval in order to trigger CGT exclusivity. The FDA is not generally aware of when an applicant commences commercial marketing, so applicants should inform FDA once marketing has commenced in order for subsequent approvals to be halted by the exclusivity. And you can do this in one of two ways. One, submit a correspondence to your ANDA, and two, email the patent and exclusivity team at the following email address, and we would advise doing both of these actions. OGD will continue to approve other ANDAs for the drug product if notice of marketing has not been received.
Our first challenge question. All of the following are reasons a CGT designated ANDA would not qualify for CGT 180-day exclusivity except A, was not the first approved CGT designated ANDA, B, there were unexpired patents for the RLD at the time the ANDA was submitted, C, on the date the ANDA was approved, there was now adequate generic competition, D, the CGT designated drug product had been previously subject to forfeiture of patent challenge 180-day exclusivity. And the answer is C, on the date the ANDA was approved, there was now adequate generic competition. So we talked about earlier inadequate generic competition, and that relates to CGT designation. Not to CGT exclusivity. Challenge question number 2. When may I request CGT designation? A, with a prior approval supplement. B, prior to submission of an original ANDA. C, prior to approval of an original ANDA. D, with an amendment of an ANDA. And the answer is B, prior to submission of an original ANDA. We noted earlier in our presentation that the request for CGT designation should be submitted along with or prior to submission of your original ANDA. We also wanted to point out the following CGT resources. The first link is to the FDA website containing the final guidance. The second website is the public docket where the draft and final guidances were published and where the comments were received on the draft and final guidances. Then the third link is to the CGT approvals page. We showed the snapshot of that earlier, showing products where that had approved ANDAs and the information relating to exclusivity, commercial marketing, forfeiture, and those sorts of things. In summary, we wanted to reiterate three things. CGT designation is intended and should be requested for drugs with inadequate generic competition. And you should make your request before or at the time of submitting an original ANDA. And to trigger CGT exclusivity and halt other approvals, you should inform FDA as soon as you've commenced commercial marketing. We appreciate your attention during this virtual presentation, and hopefully our information concerning CGT designation and exclusivity will be helpful, and we'd be happy to take your questions during the panel discussion.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today to talk about 180-day patent challenge exclusivity, which is different from the competitive generic therapy 180-day exclusivity that my colleague Jonathan Hughes just spoke about. For today, I'll be referring to patent challenge exclusivity as 180-day exclusivity throughout this presentation. We'll start by briefly discussing some context for 180-day exclusivity and how an ANDA can become eligible for 180-day exclusivity. We'll then talk about ways 180-day exclusivity can be forfeited. We will also describe some of the mechanics on how 180-day exclusivity works. And finally, we'll highlight a few resources that provide more information on 180-day exclusivity than we can fit into today's presentation. So first, just a little context for how 180-day exclusivity came to be. The abbreviated new drug application pathway, as we know it today, was created by the Drug Price Competition and Patent Term Restoration Act of 1984, which is commonly referred to as the Hatch-Waxman Amendments. The Hatch-Waxman Amendments, including provisions pertaining to the 180-day exclusivity period, were further amended by the Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act of 2003. Collectively, the Hatch-Waxman Amendments strive to balance many interests at stake, not just the generic industry's interests, but also those of the public, patent owners, and others. One example of that balance in the Hatch-Waxman Amendments is the offer to NDA holders of the possibility of certain regulatory exclusivities and patent term extension, some of which we heard about earlier today. In exchange, NDA holders are subject to generic competition, whereby ANDA applicants are permitted to rely on FDA's prior findings of safety and effectiveness in an NDA. 180-day exclusivity is another example of that balance in the Hatch-Waxman Amendments. The statute requires NDA holders to identify patents that claim the drug product or an approved method of using the drug product. FDA lists those patents in the Orange Book. ANDA applicants generally must address those listed patents. If an ANDA applicant chooses to submit a Paragraph 4 certification, there are both potential benefits and potential consequences. On the one hand, that applicant may be able to market its ANDA product before the listed patent would have expired, and also may be eligible for 180 days of marketing exclusivity with respect to certain other ANDA applicants. On the other hand, that applicant may be subject to patent litigation and a 30-month stay of ANDA approval. So now we have come to the subject of this presentation, 180-day exclusivity. It is defined in the statute as shown here on the left side of the slide. Basically, it means ANDAs that contain paragraph 4 certifications will not be made effective by FDA until 180 days after the date any first applicant first commercially markets the drug. Let's break that down a little further. First, let's take a closer look at a paragraph 4 certification, which is defined in the statute and in the regulations, and is one possible way that an ANDA applicant may choose to address a timely listed patent. It requires the ANDA applicant to certify that in its opinion and to the best of its knowledge, the ANDA product does not infringe the listed patent, or the listed patent is invalid or unenforceable. Commercial marketing is defined in the regulations and essentially means the ANDA applicant introduces or delivers for introduction the ANDA product or the listed drug into interstate commerce. First applicant is defined in the statute and is described as an applicant that on the first day on which a substantially complete application containing a paragraph 4 certification is submitted, submits a substantially complete ANDA that contains and lawfully maintains a paragraph 4 certification. Let's take a closer look at that definition. As stated in the statute, a first applicant has to submit on the first day. There can be more than one such application submitted on the first day, meaning there can be multiple first applicants. The statute also says that a first applicant's application submitted on the first day must be substantially complete. Substantially complete is defined in the statute as an ANDA that on its face is sufficiently complete to permit a substantive review and contains all the information required by paragraph 2A of section 505J, which lists what an ANDA, quote, shall contain. FDA will indicate its determination that an ANDA is substantially complete when the agency receives the ANDA for review under 21 CFR 314.101. If FDA determines that an ANDA was substantially complete as of the date the ANDA was submitted, FDA will consider the ANDA to have been received as of the date of submission. The last aspect of the statutory definition of first applicant we wanted to highlight today is that the application must contain a paragraph 4 certification, meaning the ANDA needs only one paragraph 4 certification. So the ANDA does not need to paragraph certify against all of the listed patents. In fact, if the listed patent has both drug product claims and method of use claims, and the applicant submits a paragraph 4 certification only to the drug product claims, and submits a section 8 statement to the method of use claims, that is considered an application that contains a paragraph 4 certification. To illustrate some of the concepts we just discussed, here is a hypothetical scenario where there are 4 ANDAs, ANDAs A, B, C, and D, and there are 3 listed patents. For simplicity, let's assume each ANDA is substantially complete when submitted and each lawfully maintains their respective paragraph 4 certifications. Let's say ANDA A submits first in time and contains only paragraph 3 certifications to all 3 listed patents. Then, ANDA B and C submit on the same day. ANDA B has 1 paragraph 4 certification to patent 1. ANDA C also has just 1 paragraph 4 certification, but it is to patent 2. Later, ANDA D is submitted, also with just 1 paragraph 4 certification, this time to patent 3. In this scenario, ANDA B and C would be considered first applicants, and the day on which they submitted their substantially complete applications with paragraph 4 certifications is considered the first day. ANDA D was submitted after ANDA B and ANDA C. So even though ANDA D is the first ANDA to paragraph 4 certified to patent 3, the applicant is nonetheless considered to be a subsequent applicant because ANDA D was not submitted on the first day. Now we're going to move on to discuss forfeiture of 180-day exclusivity. So let's say you have met all of the criteria to be a first applicant. Does that mean 180-day exclusivity is guaranteed to that first applicant? No. Congress amended the Hatch-Waxman Amendments in 2003 and added forfeiture provisions. The statute describes forfeiture events, which, if one occurs, can cause a first applicant to forfeit its 180-day exclusivity. These forfeiture events include if a first applicant fails to market the ANDA product by a certain time period that is determined by a calculation described further in the statute. Withdrawal of the ANDA. If a first applicant amends or withdraws the paragraph 4 certification that qualified it as a first applicant. For example, if a first applicant had submitted one paragraph 4 certification and amends its ANDA to change that paragraph 4 certification to a paragraph 3 certification, then that would be considered a forfeiture event, even if the applicant later amended its ANDA again to change the paragraph 3 certification back to a paragraph 4 certification. We do want to highlight here that this provision does not apply where a first applicant initially submits a paragraph 4 certification and then amends its ANDA with a paragraph 4 certification to the same patent. That is considered a recertification, not an amendment of the paragraph 4 certification that would trigger this forfeiture provision. A fourth example is if a first applicant fails to obtain tentative approval within 30 months after the date the ANDA is filed. There is one exception, if the failure is caused by a change in or a review of the requirements for approval imposed after the application was filed. If a first applicant enters an agreement with another applicant, the patent owner, or the NDA holder that is found to violate antitrust laws. And finally, if all qualifying paragraph 4 certified patents expire. For purposes of our discussion today, we don't have time to get into the details about these various forfeiture provisions, but we want to highlight a resource that has further information. The agency has published a draft guidance on questions and answers on 180-day exclusivity, which has a subsection dedicated to questions and answers on forfeiture. The draft guidance can be located on FDA's website at the link shown on the slide. We're going to shift gears now to talk about some of the mechanics on how 180-day exclusivity works. So when is 180-day exclusivity eligibility determined? Generally, the determination is made when an ANDA is otherwise ready for approval. In some cases, a formal determination may be deferred, for example, if there is no subsequent applicant that is ready for approval. When does the 180-day exclusivity period begin? It starts when any first applicant first commercially markets the ANDA product or the listed drug. As a reminder, the regulations state that a first applicant must submit correspondence to its ANDA notifying FDA within 30 days of the date of its first commercial marketing. There is only one 180-day exclusivity period for each drug product. Once triggered, it's triggered for all first applicants, and it runs without interruption. For example, if first applicant A begins commercially marketing its ANDA product on day 0, then the 180-day exclusivity period is triggered for all first applicants. Let's say on day 90, first applicant B begins commercially marketing its ANDA product. At this point, first applicant A has already enjoyed 90 days of the 180-day exclusivity period. Come day 180, subsequent applicants' ANDAs can now be made effective. And at this point, first applicant A will have enjoyed the full 180-day exclusivity period. First applicant B will have enjoyed 90 days of the 180-day exclusivity period. and any first applicant who is not yet marketing, like unfortunate first applicant C in this scenario, will not get to share in the 180-day exclusivity period. Another aspect of 180-day exclusivity, it only blocks approval of subsequent ANDAs that contain paragraph 4 certifications. It does not affect previously approved applications, and it does not block approval of authorized generics or other first applicants' ANDAs, or approval of a subsequent ANDA that does not have a paragraph 4 certification, which might happen, for example, if a subsequent ANDA chose to submit a Section 8 statement to a listed method of use patent instead of a paragraph 4 certification. Also, 180-day exclusivity can be relinquished or waived. What's the difference? Relinquish means the first applicant abandons its eligibility for 180-day exclusivity. If all first applicants relinquish eligibility, then subsequent applicants otherwise eligible for approval will be informed. Waive means a first applicant permits approval of a particular subsequent applicant's ANDA during the 180-day exclusivity period. If a first applicant waives 180-day exclusivity in favor of a specific subsequent applicant, only that subsequent applicant will be notified. Finally, we want to share a few resources where you can find more information about 180-day exclusivity. First is our paragraph 4 certification list, which is maintained on FDA's website and contains a wealth of information. You can consult this list to see if a paragraph 4 certification has been submitted with respect to a particular reference listed drug, or to see the number of potential first applicant ANDAs and the 180-day decision status. We do want to note that FDA does not disclose the identity of the ANDA applicants for pending ANDAs, and the information in the paragraph 4 certification list is for reference only. The agency's regulatory decisions are based on data and information available to the agency in relevant applications. The other resource we wanted to highlight was mentioned earlier. It is the draft guidance with questions and answers on 180-day exclusivity, and which can be found on FDA's website at the link on this slide. That brings us to our first challenge question. The 180-day exclusivity period, A, is guaranteed for all first applicants. B, blocks approval of all ANDAs submitted after the first day. C, can block approval of subsequent applicants' ANDAs. Or D, runs for 180 days after the approval of each first applicant's ANDA. The correct answer here is C. The 180-day exclusivity period can block approval of subsequent applicants' ANDAs. Challenge question number 2. Which of the following statements is not true? A. To be a first applicant, the applicant must submit a paragraph 4 certification to each listed patent. B. There can be more than one first applicant. C. There is only one 180-day exclusivity period. D. The 180-day exclusivity period can be forfeited, relinquished, or waived. The correct answer here is A. To be a first applicant, the applicant must only submit a paragraph 4 certification. The applicant does not need to paragraph 4 certify against each listed patent. In summary, 180-day exclusivity is an incentive for ANDA applicants who expose themselves to the risk of patent litigation. First applicants are eligible for 180-day exclusivity. 180-day exclusivity blocks approval of subsequent applicants' ANDAs. And 180-day exclusivity is not guaranteed. It can be forfeited, relinquished, or waived. That concludes the presentation today. Thank you for listening. I'd be happy to answer any questions during the question and answer panel.